I would never have imagined that an innocent weekend in the mountains could overturn every certainty, upset my senses, and reawaken desires that I thought were dormant. But that night everything took an unexpected turn. Giorgio and I hadn't had a moment just for ourselves in too long. Work, routine, and responsibilities had dragged us into a mechanism in which the lightheartedness of the first years of marriage now seemed like a distant memory. So when he proposed a weekend in the mountains with his historic friends, I accepted without hesitation. I hoped that detaching ourselves from the usual reality could do us good, bring us back to an intimacy that seemed to have vanished amid commitments and obligations. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing, while for us, it is fundamental. The cabin was located in a remote place, surrounded by greenery and silence. There were 8 of us, almost all of Giorgio's friends since school. I didn't know them well, but among them there was Leonardo, his best friend, a man with whom I had always had a particular understanding. He and Giorgio were inseparable, like brothers, but every time I met him I felt a strange vibration between us, something I had always chosen to ignore. The first evening passed pleasantly. We cooked together, toasted with a full-bodied wine that warmed body and soul, recalling old anecdotes. Giorgio seemed relaxed, laughing and enjoying the company, but I sensed a latent energy in the air. Every time my gaze met Leonardo's, a shiver ran through my skin, an inexplicable, almost forbidden shiver. After dinner, the fireplace crackled lively, spreading an enveloping warmth. The atmosphere was intimate, almost hypnotic. Giorgio yawned, stretching. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to sleep," he announced in a voice thick with wine. I followed him with my eyes as he retreated, leaving me with a vague sensation in my stomach. I knew he would sleep heavily. I remained chatting with the others, but my gaze was inevitably drawn to Leonardo. He appeared confident, serene, as if he knew exactly what was happening between us. There was no need for words. Everything took place in that exchange of glances full of implications. One by one, the others began to retreat. The silence became denser. The voices died away, leaving us alone with the sound of the fire burning. Leonardo didn't look away. His breathing near me was enough to feel a warmth pervading every fiber of my body. A slight shift, a hint of movement, yet I perceived it as a touch, a silent invitation to something inevitable. His heart began to beat faster. His breathing became irregular. We both knew what was happening. All rationality had disappeared, leaving room for an uncontrollable desire. The heat of the cabin mixed with the fire I felt inside. Was it desire? Was it madness? It was what I should never have felt, but in that moment it seemed like the only right thing. We were left alone in front of the fireplace. The crackling of the fire was the only sound that filled the room. Leonardo smiled at me with that intensity that I had always avoided deciphering. "It seems like there's only the 2 of us left," he said, his voice low and filled with something I didn't dare define. My heart beat faster. A part of me screamed at me to get up and join Giorgio, but the other chained me to that sofa, unable to move. "Yeah, it seems so," I replied, trying to sound natural, but the pounding in my ears gave me away. Leonardo stood up slowly, approaching the fireplace to add a log of wood. The light of the flames danced on his features, making him even more fascinating, almost unattainable, yet it was there, so close. When he sat down next to me again, the distance between us had shrunk to just a few centimeters. I could feel the heat of his body, his light and enveloping scent. "You don't seem to be having much fun," he murmured, not taking his eyes off the flames. "Is everything okay between you and Giorgio?" His question caught me off guard. It wasn't the kind of conversation I was expecting, but maybe it was exactly what I needed. Someone who saw beyond the forced smile, who sensed the emptiness I felt inside. I hesitated, then looked down. I don't know, I admitted after a long pause. Sometimes I have the feeling that we are distant. We don't fight, we don't argue, but it's as if we were on two parallel paths, unable to really meet. Leonardo nodded slowly, letting my words hang between us. I understand, he said finally, turning to me. His eyes were deep, inquiring. Giorgio is lucky to have you. You are an extraordinary woman. I'm sorry that he doesn't realize it. Those words hit me like a punch in the stomach, stirring something I had been trying to repress for months. My breathing became shorter, the hands on my legs tightened weakly. I looked down, unable to bear the weight of his sincerity. The silence became dense, full of tension. I could feel something was about to happen. I knew it. I could feel it in the air. I had to leave. I had to close that loophole before it was too late. But my body didn't move, trapped between reason and desire. I stared at the fire, trying to put my thoughts in order, but Leonardo's voice brought me back to reality. You know, he whispered, his voice warm, welcoming. I've always thought you were incredible. You're strong, smart, and beautiful. My heart leapt into my throat. I wasn't used to receiving such direct compliments, especially not from a friend of Giorgio's. Yet the way he said it, without hesitation, without irony, made me feel vulnerable and desired at the same time. You shouldn't say those things, I murmured, but my voice betrayed my hesitation. Leonardo moved slightly closer, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Why not? It's the truth, and I think you need to hear it. The distance between us closed further. I could feel his breath touching my skin. The fire illuminated the room, but I felt like I was in a world apart, suspended in time. The pounding in my chest was deafening, a silent struggle between what was right and what I wanted. I shouldn't be here with you, I whispered, almost more to myself than to him. But as I said it, I knew it was already too late. Leonardo didn't answer. He simply raised his hand and touched my face with his fingertips. That light touch made me shiver, igniting something I would never be able to turn off. There was no need for words. Before I could even think about stopping him, his lips were already on mine. It was a slow, careful kiss, but full of all the tension accumulated during the evening. It smelled of transgression, of something forbidden, but also incredibly desired, a desire that perhaps, unconsciously, I had cultivated for much longer than I wanted to admit. When we broke away, our breathing was labored, our hearts were racing. I could have gotten up, I could have stopped everything, but I didn't. Our eyes met once again, and in that instant I understood that there would be no return. This is wrong, I murmured, my voice uncertain, my breathing ragged. But Leonardo didn't answer. He took my face in his hands and kissed me again, with more passion, with more conviction, and I let myself go, completely. Every barrier I had erected over time crumbled under the weight of that uncontrollable desire. Leonardo was there, real, tangible. And for a moment, everything else ceased to exist. The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions, whispers and bodies looking for each other without hesitation. Giorgio slept in the next room, unaware of what was happening, while I lost myself in Leonardo's hands and kisses. Every gesture, every caress awakened a part of me whose existence I had almost forgotten. It was like living in a parallel reality, a place where guilt had no place, and the only thing that mattered was the present. When we finally parted, the realization of what we had done crept into my mind. Leonardo looked at me with a mixture of desire and remorse. I couldn't say anything. Words were useless. I dressed in silence, avoiding his gaze, and went back to my room. Giorgio was sleeping soundly. I climbed into bed next to him, but my body was still reeling from the shocks of that night. I tried to close my eyes, to push away the thoughts, but every time I did, Leonardo's face came back to me with an almost painful clarity. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I was caught between the guilt of cheating on my husband and the burning desire to relive every moment of that forbidden night. The next morning was even more difficult. I woke up early before everyone else and tried to act as if nothing had happened. But the tension was palpable. Leonardo avoided my gaze while Giorgio continued to behave normally, unaware of everything. I felt like I was going crazy. The breakfast, the light chatter, the sound of the cups touching each other seemed to clash with the storm inside me. And now, tell me, what would you do in my place? Can you really stifle a desire that continues to burn, or would the guilt eventually consume you? Write to me in the comments. In the afternoon, Giorgio proposed that we take a walk in the woods. I accepted, hoping that the fresh air could free me from my thoughts, but his every gesture, his every word, seemed like a silent reproach to me. I felt suffocated by the weight of my betrayal, yet part of me didn't want to let it go. Every time I met Leonardo's gaze, even if just for an instant, the desire resurfaced forcefully. That evening, the tension between us was even stronger. Sitting around the table with the others, we feigned indifference, but every movement, every word was full of implication. I felt his gaze on me every time he thought he wasn't being watched, and my heart went crazy. I tried to concentrate on Giorgio, on the conversations, but his presence next to me was an irresistible attraction. After dinner, Giorgio proposed that we all watch a film together. I accepted only so as not to be alone with my thoughts. We sat on the couch, and as the movie played on the screen, I felt more and more uncomfortable. Leonardo was close, too close. I could smell his scent, his enveloping presence. At a certain point, Giorgio fell asleep on the sofa, as often happened. I stood still, holding my breath. Leonardo was still awake. I knew it. And I also knew he was thinking exactly what I was thinking. Our hands touched for a moment, an imperceptible touch, a suspended moment that seemed eternal. I could have backed away. I should have done it, but I didn't. We remained still for a moment, suspended in a silence full of tension. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Leonardo got up and headed towards the living room door. He didn't say anything, but his look was a clear invitation. I looked around, making sure Giorgio was fast asleep. My heart was beating wildly. My head was screaming to stop, but my legs moved on their own. I followed him. I found him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, his hands stuck in the pockets of his jeans. He stared at me in a way that evaporated every doubt, every hesitation. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly approached, feeling the blood pounding in my veins. There was no need for words. Before I could even think about what I was doing, Leonardo grabbed me by the waist and kissed me. This time there was no hesitation. There was no waiting. It was urgent, desperate, as if there was no more time to hold back. His hands explored my body with a confidence that made me shiver, and I let myself go completely, forgetting everything else. Every kiss, every touch erased rationality, leaving room only for that moment, that uncontrollable desire. We were alone, in a house that didn't belong to us, a few steps away from Giorgio, who slept unaware of everything. Yet that very risk made everything even more intense. Leonardo picked me up, placing me on the kitchen counter. The contrast between the cold of the surface and the heat of our bodies sent a shiver down my spine. Every second seemed to stretch on forever, and I couldn't stop longing for it. When we finally separated, we stood looking at each other, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. What we had done could not be undone, and the thought of having to pretend again in front of Giorgio suffocated me with anguish. "We can't continue like this," I whispered, desperately trying to find a shred of rationality. Leonardo stared at me, hands still on my hips. "I know, but what do you want to do?" His voice was low, full of mixed emotions. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what was right. On the one hand, I didn't want to hurt Giorgio, but on the other, what I felt for Leonardo had become impossible to ignore. Reluctantly, we pulled away. I returned to the living room, where Giorgio was still sound asleep. I sat next to him, observing his calm face. A wave of guilt washed over me, but it was too late for regrets. The next day was torture. Every time I met Leonardo's gaze, the desire was rekindled, but we both knew we couldn't continue like this. We had to make a decision. But which one? I knew it. The next night, Giorgio took my hand and took me for a walk. His heart accelerated, fearing that he had guessed something. I tried to stay calm, but his every gesture seemed like a silent reproach. He stopped under a tree and looked me in the eyes. "I've been seeing you strange lately," he said with gentle concern. "Is there something wrong?" His thoughtful tone broke my heart. For a moment, I wanted to throw myself into his arms and confess everything, but the words didn't come out. Instead, I shook my head and forced a smile. "Nothing. I'm just a little tired," I whispered, hoping my voice didn't betray the turmoil inside me. Giorgio shook my hand tighter. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I don't want you to feel alone." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I had never felt so alone. Guilt hit me like a sudden wave, taking my breath away. How could I have betrayed a man like Giorgio? A good, generous man who loved me without reserve. I felt crushed by the weight of my guilt, as if the world was collapsing on me. "Thank you," I murmured, looking down to avoid his eyes. I knew that if I continued to watch it, I would collapse. Giorgio held me in an affectionate embrace, but I remained motionless, unable to reciprocate that gesture of love. A battle raged inside me. I loved Giorgio, but the attraction I felt for Leonardo was still a fire burning under my skin, a desire that didn't want to go away. We went home in silence, and I tried to behave normally, but deep down, I knew that this farce couldn't last forever. In the following days, I did everything I could to avoid Leonardo. Every time our eyes met, a wave of desire overwhelmed me, but I had to resist. I could no longer lie to Giorgio, nor to myself. I had to make a decision, and I knew which one was the right one: to stay faithful to my marriage, even if it meant stifling the feelings I had for Leonardo. One evening, while Giorgio was out on business, Leonardo joined me in the kitchen. His gaze was different, more intense, almost as if he understood my attempt to distance myself. He slowly approached, and I tensed, knowing exactly what might happen if I wasn't strong enough to stop him. "We can't continue like this," I said in a firm voice, even though I was trembling inside. Every fiber in my body still wanted him, but I knew giving in would be a mistake. Leonardo looked at me for a long time, pursing his lips. "I know," he replied, his voice low, full of emotion, "but we can't pretend that nothing exists between us." Those words were like a sharp blade, because he was right. What had happened could not be ignored, but ignoring him didn't mean giving up, and I knew what I had to do. "It's over, Leonardo," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't continue to betray Giorgio. I love him, and I don't want to lose him." Leonardo remained silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand," he murmured with a note of sadness in his voice, "but I want you to know that I will never forget you." Those words left an emptiness in my chest, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I looked at him one last time, then turned and walked back into the living room, leaving him there, alone with his thoughts. In the following days, I felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. I felt I had made the right choice, but I couldn't stop thinking about Leonardo, about what had happened between us. Giorgio, unaware of everything, continued to treat me with the same sweetness as always, and I tried to concentrate on him, on our future together. But deep down in my heart, I knew that the weight of that betrayal would accompany me forever. If you want to receive new videos of the series, write "I want the sequel" in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive a preview of future publications. Thank you.